In this lesson, we will create a one-point perspective burst. In order to make your one-point perspective burst, you will need colored paper, white paper, pencil, a ruler, scissors, and a glue mat. So what exactly is perspective? Perspective is an art technique for creating an illusion of 3 dimensions, depth and space, on a 2-dimensional flat surface. Perspective is what makes a painting seem to have form, distance, and look real. The same rules of perspective apply to all subjects, whether it's a landscape, seascape, still life, interior scene, portrait, or figure painting. When we look at this picture of the railroad tracks running into the distance, the way the artist used perspective creates depth, making this 2-dimensional picture appear to be 3-dimensional. Let's go back to those elements of art. Shape. Circles, triangles, rectangles, octagons, hexagons, we know them. These are called geometric shapes. Geometric shapes are 2-dimensional. They are flat. On the other hand, forms, like we see here, a cube, a cylinder, a pyramid, and a sphere, have depth. They appear to be 3-dimensional. A form is like a sculpture, but when you transform in a drawing a circle into a sphere, that's called being implied as 3-dimensional. Even though it's on a flat surface, it appears to be 3D. Perspective creates third dimensions on flat 2-dimensional shapes. So now that we understand the difference between shapes and forms, and a little bit more about what perspective means, let's move into our lesson.
Alrighty, my friends, in this lesson we are going to be creating a simple one-point perspective work of art. So we're just going to start to practice one-point perspective in a very simplified way. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go over materials. We're going to need quite a few things for this project. We're going to need a little bit of colored paper. It can be any colored paper you want. We're going to be cutting this paper, creating geometric shapes. We're also going to need a pair of scissors, a ruler, a glue stick, a Sharpie if you would like. You do not need to use Sharpie, but I am a big fan of Sharpies. A pencil and a piece of paper, and of course a glue mat. I don't have a glue mat with me, so I am just using an additional piece of white paper to do my gluing on. So, for this activity, we're going to be focusing on geometric shapes. And as we know, geometric shapes are circles, triangles, squares, rectangles, diamonds, hexagons, all of those things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our colored paper to create a few geometric shapes. And again, simple. This is about creating simple shapes, simple squares, rectangles, triangles. We are not working with organic shapes in this lesson. This is just geometric shapes. If you have shapes with round edges, it can make it a little bit trickier. So I'm just focusing on my rectangles, my squares, my triangles. I think I'm going to do a skinnier rectangle. So I'm just starting by cutting out my geometric shapes. Again, that is our focus. Cutting out shapes kind of makes it easier as well. Instead of drawing them in, we can just cut them out. I'm going to do a circle. And again, you don't need a lot, you just need a few. I'm going to do a diamond. Perfect. So this looks great. This is way enough shapes. What we're going to do now is we're going to put a point in the center of our piece of paper with a pencil. That might be hard to see, so I'm just going to put a Sharpie mark down on there. It's right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have my shapes kind of go around the outside of my dot, almost like people sitting around the outside of a campfire. If this is my campfire, these are all the people sitting around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue my shapes down. So I'm taking my piece, I'm putting it on my glue mat that I have next to me, and giving it a push. And I'm going to repeat that for all of these shapes. All right, we are all set with step one. I have all my shapes glued down. If you're noticing there's any flyaways, see how this little part is sticking up? You can just add a little bit more glue and give it a nice push. So just making sure all your shapes are nice and flat. We are done with glue, so I'm just going to move these materials out of the way. And now we're going to be moving on to making these shapes appear to be three-dimensional through using one-point perspective. What I am going to do is I am going to make lines from my dot to the corners of my shapes. Now a circle doesn't have corners, it's round, but we're kind of going to make it connect almost like a cone, like these shapes are bursting out from the center. So I'm going to start with my square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the corner of my square with the dot. So I'm checking, okay, that's lined up, that's lined up. Again, really make sure, because it might be lined up here, but that's not lined up here. So you really want to make sure you're moving that ruler, and then you're going to make a line just like that. There's one of my lines. Now I'm going to do my other one. So I'm just going to move my ruler over to the other corner. Perfect. So it almost looks like that shape is bursting out from the center. I'm going to move on to my triangle now. So I'm going to go from one corner of my triangle to the center. And I'm going to do it on the other side now, making sure to line it up. If you want, you can make that line go through here, but I like focusing on these as being solid shapes. So since this is a solid shape, we wouldn't see this line. So we're just focusing on connecting to those two parts. Okay, so now I'm going to get to my circle. This is a little trickier. So I think that outside of my circle is like right there. It's lined up. I'm drawing my line. Perfect. And now I'm going to do that on the other side. It looks like a cylinder bursting out. So we're transforming these shapes into forms, making them appear three-dimensional. Ooh, this is going to have three. And this one's going to be very, very skinny. And you are done. That's all. This was just a nice little exercise in one-point perspective, nice and simple. As we can see, we took these shapes. These are shapes right now, my colored paper. And by adding in these lines to create perspective, we turn them into forms. Forms are three-dimensional versions of shapes. So this is now a cube. This is now a cylinder, this is now a pyramid, this is now a cube, and this is also a cube or a rectangular prism, like you might have learned in math class. When you do this yourself, maybe you want to make your shapes pretty far out, some close to the dot, some far away. Make it interesting, have fun, use different colors. Maybe you want to do the lines going through the corners, making them look almost like they're hollow or see-through. The choice is yours. This is a really fun, easy activity that you can do a lot of cool stuff with. You don't have to use 5 shapes. You could do 8, you could do 10, you could do many of these. Have so much fun with this activity.